Hello everybody, James here, and it's Ask Dutch Anything, episode 58. And if you want to ask Dutch anything, which I'm sure you all do, you want to email one email, and that's questions for Dutch, that is the right one. I confused myself then, at gmail.com. Are we doing the other plugs for, the books and stuff? Because I didn't do that on the other episode.
Well, I'm in the process of writing my third book. I'm taking my time on it like I do everything else. But if you're interested in my first two books, The World According to Dutch and Tales from a Dirt Road, all you got to do is send me an email at Dirty Dutch Mantell with two L's at gmail.com, and I'll get right back to you. And you can also get a University of Dutch diploma. You can write me about that, and they're all about the same price, but it's a very nice looking diploma. James, wouldn't you say so?
I would if I had it. I think you sent it to my old... here's what happened. I told you this. You sent it to my old address, and then because I was at my new address, then I think the diploma is now just sat somewhere in a post office holding area. It's probably been burned by now.
Well, then I'll send you another one.
Yeah, I'll send you my new address.
Okay.
A very, very nice diploma as well. So there are two emails for signed merchandise, Dirty Dutch Mantell with two L's at gmail.com. But for submitting your questions to this show to Ask Dutch, it is questions for Dutch at gmail.com. And this is exactly what everybody did, including Brian O. in Georgia. It says, Dutch and James, what are your recollections of some of the old-timers in the Florida Territory, such as the Missouri Mauler, Sputnik Monroe, Jose Lothario, and Sailor Art Thomas? What are your oldest memories of anyone like them? These guys were back in the late 60s. You may not have encountered any of them. Thank you. So, do you want me to say the names again, or?
Missouri Mauler, who is the brother of Jody Hamilton, who was one of the original assassins. They were brothers. They were from Missouri. And Larry Hamilton, that was the Missouri Mauler's actual name. Oh, brother, he had a temper, and he could go to that ring. He was just a great heel. People hated him from the moment they saw him because he doesn't have that. He has the face of somebody trying to kill you, and he had a lot of heat and a bad temper, and he didn't like things to go wrong in a match because he just ended up beating the crap out of the guy. I saw him, was in some town in Georgia. That's where I met him. And he was in there with this middle of the card guy. And Larry, to his benefit, was trying to make the guy look good, because he was going under that, and I brought this up on our latest podcast. You try to make your opponent look as good as you can, because when you end up beating him, now you look that much better. But he was trying to make this guy look good, and the guy just kept screwing it up and screwing it up. Finally, Larry just got tired of it. It only took twice. We messed up twice. Larry just beat the living crap out of the guy. Threw him out of the ring and running the turnbuckle, did this, did that, and then threw him back in and did some move on him and beat him 1, 2, 3 and left him laying. And the guy didn't hop right up from it either, because, Larry was a lot bigger. Plus he was a little pissed off, and the guy sensed that. So the guy he beat just rolled out of the ring and tucked his tail between his legs, and he went on back. And no, we didn't hear anything about it, because the guy's not going to come across to our other dressing room and say, hey, Hamilton, Mauler, what the hell is going on? Because he thought now he would have kicked his ass. So, but as far as I know, he was okay. I rode with him. Nice enough guy if you kept the conversation civil. But if you got on a subject that he didn't much care for, he would get animated, and he would get himself riled up talking about it himself. So the best thing you could do is just drop the subject. Now, who was that other, Sputnik Monroe?
We've talked about Sputnik Monroe before, I think. So I think that's someone who deserves more research for sort of like the wider implications of him as well. So the other two names, we might get back to Sputnik in a second. Jose Lothario and Sailor Art Thomas first.
I don't remember Jose that much because I wasn't in Texas. that much. I was with him maybe a little bit in WWE, WWF.
Mm-hmm. You was Shawn Michaels' manager, weirdly.
And never met Sailor Art Thomas. I just saw him on TV in the Mid-Atlantic area. I've never met him.
Sputnik Monroe, then. So, was he retired by the time you got to Nashville, Memphis area?
Well, he was retired, but the stories about him weren't. So, this is the story about Sputnik. He was making an appearance at the Mid-South fair, which, they have county fairs, they have state fairs. This was the state fair. It's a bigger one. And he was making an appearance there. And some guy walked in with a horse. And Sputnik said something about the horse. And the guy said, "No, I don't even talk to my horse like that." And then he hauled off. I think he kind of slapped the horse a little bit. He didn't slap the guy, he slapped the horse. And of course, the horse jumped around. It made the cowboy so mad. The cowboy beat the shit out of him and left him laying. So, and then, of course, word spread, this cowboy beat Sputnik Monroe's ass over there in the agricultural building or whatever. And they tried, and that story spread all over Memphis and all over the counties around Memphis. And Sputnik went on TV and said the story got out of hand, but he challenged the guy to meet him at Monday night at the Mid-South Coliseum and see who the tough man was. And the guy refused to show up. He said, no, you guys baited me into this. Because when he hit him, he knocked him down, and he thought that was much too easy. So he said, "You guys baited me, wanted me to come down, and so he could kick my ass. I'm not coming down there." But anyway, that was a story. But he really got shit knocked out of him.
Do you know? I thought
and he was always like half-ass drunk, and he had a voice like this, and oh man, he would just make you mad just listening to him talk. But he was crazy. But in Memphis, there's a story about him. Everybody hated him except the black fans. They loved him for some reason because they made him, this is back in the segregation days, they made them all sit upstairs in the $2 tickets, $2 seats. And of course, that slowly went away. But they loved him because he was the one all the other white people were booing. So, and they were booing him, but the black people were cheering him. So, and they liked him more than anything else. Because I think he made a statement one time. He said, "I am not going to ever wrestle in Memphis again until you open up the floor seating for the black people too." Of course, they all heard about this. It was in the paper and everything. And they loved him for that. Because he kind of stood up for them, because you can't make them sit upstairs like some second-class citizen. And so when they opened up the floor seating so blacks could sit down there, he cemented his legacy with all the black people in Memphis, because they literally loved Sputnik Monroe.
I believe he was even arrested at the time for hanging around black areas or black population areas.
Well, he did go into I heard this, he went into a restaurant and he was in there drinking, and they came in there and they asked him why he was there. He said, "Because the goddamn wannabe, that's why." And he was smarted ass to the cop, and they arrested him. They took him in. Nothing happened about it. But of course, that story spread like wildfire too, because he stood up to the cops. So, and what year did Sputnik Monroe die?
I don't know. Was his heyday in the 50s or 60s? I'll look that up.
Mostly in the late 50s and 60s. Of course, he had that blonde hair, that stripe going back. And
he died in 2006.
Wow.
At the age of 77 in Florida. He was born in Dodge City, Kansas.
Yep. I thought he had died back in the 80s. But he died in 2000 what? 6. Anyway, good guy. I only met him a couple of times, but He was everything they said he was.
Apparently, he actually retired in 1988. So he was working somewhere.
And the black people in Memphis, they actually attribute what he did to the normalization of race relations in Memphis. Mm-hmm. They give him credit for that. So good for him.
So I think he was working, I mean, see, I'm just looking at his matches here, working fairly regularly until 1975, had a couple of matches in 1980. And then he had one match in 1988 in Memphis, the Mid-South Coliseum, against Billy Wicks.
And Billy Wicks was another legend in Memphis.
There you go. Right.
Big time legend.
We'll move on. Ethan Allen says, "Hello, James and Dutch, long-time listener. I live in Mullins, South Carolina, Marion County, which is located in between Florence and Mytrle Beach. This is about 3 hours from Dutch's hometown. My question is, does Dutch have any memories or stories that stand out from the Florence, Marion, Conway, Mytrle Beach area? The Territories and WCW used to run this area a lot, but it wasn't a weekly town. Dusty and Flair were always great draws at Conway High School, but I'd love to hear his thoughts on the area."
Oh, great wrestling fans. I wasn't down there that much because, it's like every other territory. They have their regular Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday towns. If they ran Conway, it would probably be on every 2 months or so, and they would probably run it on a Thursday night. Is what they would do. And I was there. I think I was there one time, and it was a nice building, nice town, good wrestling fans there. But as far as anything happening there, the people were halfway civilized there, so they didn't riot and throw things and flatten your tires and do all this stuff. Of course, they're not going to do anything they call it a spot show. They're not going to do anything in a spot show that's going to make the people that wild, so they go out and tear your cars up and all that. They'll save that for the big towns with good security. So, but I never had any trouble there, but the fans were very good there.
Next question. Mark says, "Why was it a habit for Koko B. Ware to dress in his car?"
I never heard that. I don't know what that means.
You know what it means? Apparently he just dressed for his match in his car in the example that Mark has given us.
Well, he didn't dress in his car in Memphis. I don't know where did he see him dressing in a car?
The email was longer off the top of my head. I think it was like somewhere in the 90s, like for Affer and Seeker's promotion, maybe. So it's just like some little indie show and he just dressed in his car.
Well, I'm going to have to plead nolo contendere on this. You like that word?
Mm-hmm.
My lawyer friend for the story time of Dutch, Mr. Burbrower, taught me that word. It means no contest, but I've never seen him dress in a car, so I don't know.
Next question. Henry from Spartanburg, South Carolina, has sent in a Jim Cornette promo on an episode of Down and Dirty with Dutch that, hey, we might as well watch it now, so 1 second. Okay, here it is.
Some very interesting comments from the big boss man here with me right now, as I promised.
Oh, you wanted to say something, Dutch, didn't you? Or did you?
Well, I was going to explain where this comes from.
Well, Smoky Mountain Wrestling, what's happened?
No, I just did a backstage segment or sometimes an in-ring segment with one of the talents, and I would just be the co-host. I would be the co-host of it, or host of it, and then I'd interview somebody. But doing an interview with Cornette, you don't got to do nothing. Just hold the mic, and he does all the rest of it.
Do you know what the setup is? I think we'll find out what the setup is, won't we? So here we go.
Jim Cornette. Now, Jim, you've heard what the boss man had to say, and you know what Bob Armstrong has in store for you. And frankly, right now, I'm going to have to say this. I'm glad I'm not you. You have to be a very troubled man at this point. I got hair standing up on the back of my neck, man. I got chills and shivers going down my spine. I got goosebumps coming up all over my arms. I can't sleep at night. I'm breaking out in sweat. And the whole problem is Bob Armstrong. Bob Armstrong, every top name in this business for the past 10 years has tried to back me in a corner. From Cowboy Bill Watts to the Road Warriors to the American Dream, Dusty Rhodes, Jerry the King Lawler, nobody's been able to do it. And then bullet Bob Armstrong, you come along and you think you're great commissioner of Smoky Mountain Wrestling, and every time that I've got the heavenly bodies just ready to dominate the place, you got to stick your nose in. You got to make the ruling. You got to be the referee. You got to do something.
to con Jim Cornette out of what he wants. So finally, I've had enough. I get fed up with you. And I get you in that rage in the cage where you're the referee. And my boys, they get you and they string you out and they strap you up and they crucify you, Bob Armstrong, just like the person you think you are. And I beat you half to stinking death. And I enjoyed every single minute of it because I've hated your guts for a long time. So
I've got to pause there. Stinking. That surely is just a word that only exists within wrestling promos.
Oh, yeah. Cornette, he does a great promo here.
Oh, what do? You don't, like the 184-year-old goof that you are, you don't go back home and you don't retire. No. You go back in the gym and you work out and you get back in shape and you get your boys some kind of clan. And they all come up here and they start waging war on me and the Heavenly Bodies and the Bruise Brothers. And now you've gone and you've used your pull with the board of directors. You've got a Rage in a Cage match. Fire on a Mountain in Johnson City. You better believe the boys are going to be running. Because it's going to be a Rage in a Cage match. It's very simple. 5 men on each team. The Bruise Brothers, the Heavenly Bodies, and Jim Cornette against the Rock and Roll Express, Scott, Steve, and Bullet Bob Armstrong. 1 man from each team starts. For 5 minutes, they fight.
We get the rest of it. I'll probably do it at the end. With that being said, the Bob Armstrong feud with Jim Cornette, I mean, how much fun was that in Smokey?
It was, Bob Armstrong was over like a son of a gun in Smoky Mountain. All he had to do was walk out there. And he was the Bullet Bob. And he would wear his mask. Of course, everybody knew it was Bob Armstrong, but he'd go in there and he'd do some, you like that word, stinking? He would bang his knees together like Jimmy Valiant used to do, and he'd do something stupid. But the people ate it up. And all you have to do is just get a little bit of heat on him, and all Cornette would have to do was rake his eyes or do something, get him down, and sell him for a couple of minutes. And when he made his comeback, people would all come to their feet, and they would do whatever they had to do. He'd either beat Jim or his guys would come in or something. Some other guys come in to protect Bob. But it was really fun to watch because the people were into it. It's not that the match was so good. It just the people enjoyed watching the match because Cornette, he is like you would think he'd be, just a obnoxious little bastard. And they wanted Bob to beat the crap out of him. So when it came down to it, when Bob started beating his butt, yeah, people ate that up. But it was good to watch. I love their interviews. Bob Armstrong always did a low-key interview, but he was kind of funny with it. And Cornette, you could tell by that he was just getting wound up. And Jimmy has high blood pressure to begin with. And after some of these interviews, I think he'd probably be up around 180, 190, because he would get that worked up. He would get into his promo. And now, he didn't make this up like on the spur of the moment, but all day long he was preparing to do this interview. So he had it down, what he was going to say, how he was going to address Bob Armstrong. And he did it so well and he's actually been a great manager every place he'd been. He was a great manager when he started in Memphis. Then he went to the Mid-South. He was a great manager there. Then they went to Mid-Atlantic, great manager there. Then he started his Deep South. What did he call it? Smoky Mountain Wrestling, started that. So he knows what he's doing. He knows how to book it, and he knows how to get heat, and he's been successful in that.
Next question from Eric. He says, with payoffs being so low in certain territories and wrestlers trying to save $1 any way they can, I imagine a lot of wrestlers stayed in very cheap motels. Are there any stories that you can tell us about motels having things like bed bugs or scabies? Does Dutch have any stories about any wrestlers catching bed bugs? Thank you.
Well, hell, I think I've caught a few. Oh yeah, we would stay sometimes in the cheapest hotels imaginable. Like Ric Flair would stay at the Hyatt, but he was making $5,000 or $6,000
and spending
a week. Well,
so he's spending 8 or 9 a week.
Yeah, we'd stay at the damn. I don't know, the Motel 6 Except when I stayed at a Motel 6, it wasn't a Motel 6. It was like a Motel 4. I mean, there was, and I learned this from, well, I didn't have to learn it from anybody. I would probably just do it naturally. Randy Savage. Randy Savage was the cheapest son of a gun I've ever seen on the road. He would say if you went with him somewhere you rode with him to in a town, say he drove and took his car, well, you'd have to pay him for his gas, and we call that for transportation. And sometimes he would actually write the miles down like, okay, the whole trip is like 362 miles. And he would he would multiply that by 4 cents a mile. That was 5 cents. And then you'd owe him, I don't know, $20 or $18. But he would write it down to the cent. He said, you owe me $15.65. You said, well, here's 16. No, hang on, I'll give you change. He said, no, just keep it. But he was going to give you change. He would write it down to actual cents. And some of these trips were really brutal. So add on to that, if you had to stay over, you had to stay at a Motel 6. And, they're cheaper hotels, so they're not as well maintained. I've stayed in rooms before, color TV, forget it. Hell, you may have even want to forget a TV. And if you did get a TV, sometimes, this is years ago, it would be a black and white TV with no console for it, no remote for it.
I've got a question. Is this just like a cartoon joke or something? But did you ever have coin-operated TVs in any of these places?
I don't think I had coin-operated TV, because that would have been the last straw. I mean, I just couldn't take any more. And sometimes, you'd have one towel and one washcloth. If there were 2 guys in there, or maybe 2 guys, you'd probably have 3 or 4 guys in there sometimes, because they would all jam in, like I said, to save $1. So if I had Randy Savage, Mick Foley, and Rip Taylor,
Rogers, you're thinking of, aren't you?
Rip Rogers, there's the cheapest guys in the wrestling business, and they wear that with a badge of honor, because Mick Foley he likes to brag about how cheap he is, and so does Rip, and Savage never bragged about it. Savage just kept padding that savings account.
Did you, as coin-operated things go, did you ever encounter a coin-operated vibrating bed?
Oh, I've seen those.
Were they plentiful back in the day?
No, they weren't really plentiful, but it was a quarter for 10 minutes or whatever.
Did you ever treat yourself while watching black and white TV?
Maybe I may have done that, but see, sometimes they'd have 2 beds. Sometimes 2 guys would sleep on the floor. You just throw them a blanket or a quilt, and they would snuggle up there on the floor. And I mean, here you got Ric Flair staying at the Hyatt, and we're staying at a Motel 4. Oh my God!
Okay, I've got a couple of follow-ups.
So he would ask me, so where'd y'all stay last night? We stayed at the Econo Lodge. Mm-hmm. Anything but the Motel 6.
Okay, how much in the early days, so I'm talking like, Georgia and Gunkel, the 70s, how much would a hotel run you, a crappy one and an average one, and 2, what's the most amount of people you've shared a room with or split a room with?
Well, probably 4. And the cheapest room sometimes was, if you did see it a regular Motel 8, it'd be $8 and the tax. So you were basically staying there for $2. So you're only going to be there for, I don't know, 10 hours, 8 hours, just to sleep, get up, and you take off. So, and the cheapest room, I think, was probably a $4 room, maybe, or a $6 room at Motel 6. But rooms, see, that was when the lodging business had a whole different outlook on the hotel rooms, the motel. They were mostly motels. So you could pull up right to your room, go in, and then when you come out in the morning, your room card's right there. You just get in and leave. Now, they got the hotels. You got to go in, you got to check in, you got to go up on the elevator, go down the hallway. But your security is much better in the hotels than it was in the motels. Because the motels, hell, you could have some people run across that parking lot at night shooting at each other. So it wasn't very safe where we were stayed, but it was cheap.
What's the worst hotel? In fact, just before that, did you ever stay in like youth hostels? Were there any youth hostels like in any of the territories you were visiting?
What's that mean?
So you don't know what I mean? It's really really cheap lodgings, like daily, but you essentially shared the room with a bunch of strangers in bunk beds.
No, never did that.
Okay, well they're all over in Europe. I thought maybe they would be in America. You've got them in America, I know you do. What's the single worst hotel? Is it going to be the Admiral Benbow or is it something else?
Well, the Admiral Benbow actually turned out not to be so bad because I've stayed in a lot worse, but I stayed in one time. I forgot who it was with Brian Lee or something. TV didn't work. The phone didn't work. There was no heat in it. The place it was the last room they had. Everything was sold out. So we either took it or we were going to be sleeping in the car. Or maybe the heat was halfway working. And we'd call them up, okay, you get somebody up here to fix it. Oh, be right up. That was at 2 o'clock in the morning. At 10 o'clock in the morning, nobody had come up. And we were just all wrapped up in those sheets and blankets trying to stay warm. And it was a cheap room. It was about $9. But it wasn't worth $9, but that's what we paid for it. But yeah, I've stayed in a lot of cheap motel rooms.
William from Missouri says, first and foremost, our prayers go out to Dutch and Kathy for improved health. In the early 80s, I recall Dutch wrestling on Memphis TV, and of course, it was live TV. He was wrestling an enhancement talent / carpenter named Rooster Cogburn. When the match started, something seemed off. With the match, it appeared that Rooster Cogburn was really trying to win the match. After Dutch got the 3 counts, he lifted up and punched Rooster Cogburn right in the face. There's a bit more to this, but do you remember this?
I remember wrestling him, and he was he was one of those street corner wrestlers that they would just get to show up on Saturday morning TV just to get beat. But I guess he went out there that morning and somebody had said something to him about, well, you always get beat on TV and you never look like you can win. Or I think he was in that frame of mind. And he went out, and I'd worked with him before, but he was a little bit stiffer and a little bit harder to handle. And he did what was expected of him, but I thought he held back. And yeah, I think he pissed me off a little bit. I don't remember punching him in the face. I may have. I don't know. And he never said anything about it in the back, and I never said anything about it in the back. But hey, sometimes things happen. They happen because they happen, and there was no need for it to happen. No need for what if I did punch him. No need for that. So, and as soon as we got back in the dressing room, it was all gone.
I tried to find that match. I did find one from 1989 USW. I'm not even sure it was USWA. It would have been CWA at that point still. And it's you and Rooster Cogburn. It's just a match. It's just fine. And you beat him very quickly and nothing happens. Apparently, after you punched him, our emailer says, Rooster then scooted out of the ring under the bottom rope as quickly as he could. So, there you go.
Yeah. What else is he going to do? If he just stayed around, he'd have got punched again. But I don't remember punching him. I could have. It's been so long ago, I can't remember.
Next question. Doug B says, hi, one thing I often wonder when Dutch or Cornette or any of the older veterans talk about the territory days when kayfabe was protected more strictly was about potential new wrestlers. For example, if some big guy wants to become a wrestler and maybe thinks it's all real, how is that handled? I imagine back then you couldn't just tell everybody it's predetermined when they first show up looking to become a wrestler, but also if they stick around, they are going to find out quick. So if some big tough guy shows up and says, I can beat these guys, I want to be a wrestler, what would happen next? Like, hey buddy, it's not all real, or what? So
no, if he showed up, he said, I can beat these wrestlers. You know, he's talking to the promoter. You know what the promoter would say? He said, well, I think you need to get in line and talk to somebody else. Don't talk to me. I can't put you on the card. A lot of them would show up and want to be put on the card and have a match that night. Well, that's not happening. Plus, if they come to me and they said, hey, this guy thinks he can whip all the fucking wrestlers, so we got you with him in the second match. I said, no, screw you. I ain't going out there with this guy. I don't know him from Adam's house cat. I'm not doing it. So if you want somebody to go out there with him, hey, go get Billy Robinson. Go get Kurt Angle. Go get somebody like that. So, but usually that didn't happen. The guy thinks he can be a wrestler, and so he can do a few moves. But you know what kills wrestlers basically is cardio. They get in the ring and then they start sucking wind. When they start sucking wind, brother, that's when the guy turns it on. He starts, because the guy can't do nothing. If the guy can't breathe, he can't mount any defense at all, even if he wanted to. So when I saw a guy on the mat sucking wind, well, I just beat the crap out of him more. Because that would make him not, now if he wants to fire up, now he's got to come up. He doesn't have any air anyway. So now I'm forcing him to expend all the oxygen he has. And I've had one guy just fall over one night because he just couldn't breathe. So I just went ahead and beat him. And he wasn't trying to be a tough guy, but he was trying to, stand there and try to act like a tough guy. And then when he blew up, he was gone.
Have you ever been put in a position where you had, let's call them a mark? Because in the truest sense of the word, pretty much they're a mark. Have you ever been forced to wrestle or fight a mark because they said, I want to get in the business? Have you been put in that position?
No, I've been put in the position. I didn't wrestle him, though. And I may have told you this before, the Grecian handlock I have.
Yep.
I've told that story, right?
Yeah.
That's the best way. I humiliated that guy so badly. He come up and he said, oh, you guys ain't tough. It's all fake. It's all this. I said, oh, really? And I had 3 young ladies as, standing around talking to me. And he came up and he was going to embarrass me. And I said, I'll show you what. And we locked up and I cranked down on his hand, dropped him to his knees. And I made him just apologize to all the girls I was talking to. And he told them all he was sorry. And I told him, you ever going to do this again? No, sir. I said, what? He said, no, sir. I said, oh, that's what I thought. Now get the hell out of here. And he left. And he didn't come back either.
One more thing. What territory was this most likely to happen where a fan would try and kick the way through to the locker room and challenge a wrestler or, go to the promoter or something like that? Because I know it happened in Florida quite a lot.
Well, they've had them come in to try to beat the door down in Memphis. Not in Memphis, but in some of the towns around Memphis. So this one guy, we were in this little town. We ran it every Friday night. You couldn't get about 200 or 300 people in the building. It used to be a chicken coop. And they converted it to a little bit of an arena. And the people were right on top of you anyway. So he kept telling this cop that, he was gonna wrestle a wrestler and it was all fake. So he come up to me and I'm standing outside the dressing room and he said something and I don't know if I didn't slap him, but I pushed him, said, get the fuck out of here, And then he come into the dressing room. Then the cops come in there and I told him to get the hell out too. And then when they got the guy out, the cop came back in, him and another guy. And he said, hey, who were you talking to? He said, were you talking to me? I says, did I look at you and say what I said? He said, well, yeah. And I forgot. I said, get the hell out of here. I must have looked at him. And he said, hey, I'm not a deputy just for nothing. He said, we can go outside and settle this. And I said, hey, fine. Lead the way. And I pulled my jacket off real quick. And I said, I'm waiting on you. Now he didn't know what to do. I called his bluff. So, and hell, I may have went out there and he may have damn beat the crap out of me. But he was afraid to go because he didn't know how it would end. Oh, he said he was going to arrest me. I said, well, try it and see if you can do it. Now, that's the worst thing you can tell a cop. I'm going to arrest you. He said, hey, here it is. Try and see if you can get me. Now he don't know what to do. I called his bluff. And then he said, hey, we can do this one or two ways. I said, well, the other way, what are you going to do? You want to go outside? He said, well, yeah. I said, lead the way. He was closer to the door anyway. And he didn't know what to do then. And finally, his buddy come in there and said, oh, come on, let's go. Let's get out of here. And then a week after that, the chief of the department come up to me and apologized for the guy.
Mm.
He said, I apologize that one of my officers acted rudely towards you last week, and I want to say I'm sorry, and it doesn't reflect the Tupelo Police Department. And I said, don't worry about it, Chief. It's all gone. It's all gone. And he said, well, I'm glad you understand. I said, I know. It's one of those things. But he never challenged me again anyway.
Yeah.
So
get out of my chicken coop.
Yeah, sometimes people act really crazy sometimes around the wrestling matches and in the bars. I think he'd been drinking anyway because they sold beer in the place. I think he'd been drinking anyway. So if he knew if they'd investigated, they'd have found out he'd been drinking, and it may have been the end of his job.
Next question. No name given here, but this is one that's floated around the internet for quite a while. And I think only one Honky Tonk Man's come out with it, and maybe one other person. Hello, could we get Dutch's opinion on what Honky Tonk Man said about Rick Rude's death? I know Honky Tonk had to be trolling, right? So let me just give you the synopsis of basically what he said. He said, Rick Rude injected Viagra into his wink-wonk because he thought he could get an instant hard-on. Instead, he got an infection and his nuts swelled up to the size of cantaloupes, so they had to cut everything off and he killed himself. This is complete nonsense, surely.
I never heard that in my life, ever. Now, I did hear that Rick, when he got a female in the room or in a position, he was like a machine. And that was common knowledge amongst the wrestlers. And I'm not saying that he probably never used Viagra, but I never heard anybody injecting Viagra into their pee-pee and expect to get an instant erection. I never heard that in my life. And now getting an infection and maybe having to do some surgery down there, but I never heard he had his testicles removed or anything else. I never heard that in my life. And I wish I'd not heard it today. But I never heard that. So Wayne Ferris is saying that?
Yeah, is Wayne Ferris
great
prone
story,
to a tall tale or two? Is he prone to telling?
Yeah, great story. Now I'm going to start telling it too. I'm going to spread it myself. I'm going to spread it around.
Yeah, in all seriousness, no. I mean, he said it with complete conviction as well, did Honky. I don't know how he would even be in a position to know this because he was not even...
What was he talking about? Just stories nobody knows?
I guess so. He just came out with it some time ago and basically nobody's corroborated it.
Okay, so does he have a podcast or was he doing an interview?
I don't know what it was. I'm just sort of reading the email, really. But it was some time ago that I first heard this and I was like, come on. I mean, extraordinary claims require extraordinary proof, and that's just a bunch of words with no proof whatsoever.
Well, I want to call Wayne up and ask him, what's the root of this? Is it true? And see what he says.
I'd like.
I may get a bigger story than what I'm anticipating. Hey, Wayne Ferris has tons and tons of stories. A lot of stories.
Next question. I don't have this fella's...
he's Jerry Lawler's cousin.
Yes. Him and Carl Fergie as well, isn't it?
Yep. Both of them.
Those two aren't brothers, though. They're just...
No.
Different cousins.
Yep.
Next question. I don't know. I don't have this guy's name for whatever reason, but it says, of all the famous quotes I've heard, one of my absolute favourites I believe you'll recognise immediately regarding wrestling fans is, they stabbed me 9 times, shot me twice, and set my Cadillac on fire because they loved me. What an attitude. Dutch, any stories about classy Freddie Blassie? That guy was a character among characters, and you got the idea he wasn't playing a character. He seemed genuine. Thanks, guys.
In Atlanta, he had so much heat. They did set his car on fire, I think. Flattened his tires, I know.
Oh, so his car had heat as well, then?
No, but he had heat, and they would watch. See, this is what you would have to watch. When you drive up, the fans watch what car you come up in. If you're behind the wheel, you own the car. So if you do something that they don't like, they know what car to go to, and they'll go and mess that car up. So if they set his car on fire, which is possibly true, and probably didn't stab him 9 times, but they probably did stab him and try to do everything else they could to him. But it was a love-hate relationship. They loved him and hated him at the same time. Freddie Blassie was an ultimate heel. Of course, he had the blonde hair, but he didn't have the big, massive body. But you just hated him because he just act crazy, and and a lot of times, every guy in that building thought they could whip his ass anyway, and that's what got him so much heat. So in Atlanta, I think he finally did get hurt in a riot, and he had to quit. He couldn't wrestle anymore. And he took a job downtown at the biggest Cadillac dealer in Atlanta. I forgot the name of it. He ended up selling more Cadillacs than any other salesman they'd ever had. And when he finally wanted to go back to wrestling, they give him all kind of offers, but he didn't like selling. He liked the wrestling business. So he went back. So, and he was a hell of a salesman too. I need to find out and it's still in business today, the Cadillac dealer. Maybe somebody in Atlanta can tell me what the name of it is, and I think it's still under the same name. It probably changed owners or whatever, but he was a great salesman.
I'm just looking at, I just Googled it, Classic Cadillac of Atlanta, Jim Ellis Cadillac of Atlanta, Cadillac Service Center. That's just a repair shop. Did you ever cross paths with Freddie Blassie in the territories before? Because I think he may have turned up occasionally in the WWF.
He was before my time. So
he's California as well, which I know you wouldn't have driven that far to go.
No, he was in Atlanta, in Florida a little bit, and I think basically, and he was in New York. In California, I think that's the only places he went. Was he ever in Texas?
I could look it up later, but I know he was a big deal in Japan at a time as well. I know that Steve Kern hated him.
Why did Steve Kern hate him?
I can't remember. Just hated him. There's a famous book in Steve Kern's book, by the way, the famous rib that Steve Kern put. So famous, I can't remember it off the top of my head. Did you ever actually meet him though in the WWF when he was just sort of hanging around? Visiting the locker room or...
Who, Freddie?
Yeah.
Never met him.
That's a shame. We've got, I think, maybe 2 more questions and then we're shutting down. Matthew, I've always been a fan of one guy who never made it to Intercontinental Championship level on the card in WWE when I felt he should have done, and that was Big Vito LaGrasso, a.k.a. Skull Von Crush, but in the later years, Big Vito. I felt like he had really great basics and knowledge on the business and how to work a match with his placement on the card. He also took the business seriously and went as far as to go down to developmental in 2007 on his own merit to train and to keep in shape and get the extra ring time when the dress gimmick was finished on. They put him in a dress at one point.
I know.
Anyway, I believe you may have crossed paths with him in Puerto Rico in the mid-90s and in TNA in its early days. Do you have any good stories or memories of him? And why do you think he never made it bigger than he should have done?
Well, I don't know why he didn't make it bigger. But what everybody has to remember about the wrestling game is it's a political game. That's all it is. It's who likes you and who doesn't like you, and if somebody wants to work with you or not. So if you don't play the politics right, and if you've never played politics right, you're just working your way along. So I think that he didn't impress the right people at the right time, and I think that's why he didn't make it bigger. I had him in Puerto Rico when I was there, and he had heat, but there's a difference from having heat and having drawing heat. So sometimes your smallest guy could probably have more heat than your toughest big heel, because it's a chemistry thing. So if the people are going to hate this guy more than my big heel, well, guess who's going to be on top of the card coming up? The one that they react to. So, and you can't produce that. You can't manufacture it. They either have it or they don't have it. So, and that's why I used to make it a habit. So when I had a new guy and I've never seen him work before, I would watch him leave the dressing room entrance door, walk to the ring, and see what kind of reaction he gets just going to the ring. Sometimes they got a hell of a reaction because of the way the guy walked, the way the guy looked at him, the way the guy presented himself. And I'm thinking, wait a minute, he's getting a reaction right now, not a big one, but he's getting one. And then when they introduce him, they boo him a little bit. They don't know him from Adam's house cat, but they know he's a bad guy and they don't like him. So I judge how much I'm going to push a guy by the first time or second time I see him go out in front of a crowd, because people don't get up and boo for no reason. They don't get up and holler at you for no reason. He's done something to them. He's reached them and he's touched the nerve. He's done something, but he really hadn't done anything, really. They just don't like what he's done. So, and that's how a lot of great heels were born that way, by bookers being attentive to their talent. And they're thinking, well, if he can get this reaction and he hasn't done anything, what if I push him a little bit, get some steam on him, then let him do some stuff? And that's why a lot of guys got started.
Would it be fair to say Vito, good on the card, but you didn't see him main event potential?
I didn't really see him that way, but good in the ring. And he looked like, if he'd have been in the 60s, he'd have been a great German heel, because he looked like a big Nazi out there, and he could have done that, and he would have gotten into that. But, used to be in wrestling, when they would come out, you would know exactly if they were good guys or bad guys. When you saw an Indian come out, oh, yeah, he's a good guy, he's an Indian. Or a cowboy, oh, yeah, he's a cowboy. But here comes two Nazi-looking guys, and doing the strut, well, you don't like them. Or here comes a Japanese guy. Oh, you don't like him either. If they're waving the flag, because they're the enemies of the United States. They can't be good guys. I mean, they ended up later on, some of the Japanese guys. But basically, it's sometimes the first time you see somebody as a fan, that's what they are. And if they don't like him, he's a heel. If they do like him, he's a babyface.
Early in Vito's career, it was like Von Crush or Von Cruss, and it was vaguely Germanic as well, so I guess that you weren't the only person to think, a throwback to the 60s. Our final question for this episode of Ask Dutch Anything. Sam says, hi Dutch, I hope your recovery is going well. I was wanting your thoughts on when the Road Warriors visited Memphis Wrestling and drew record houses with the Fabulous Ones in around 1983. Is this how you remember it, and what were Hawk and Animal like to be around in their early years? Thank you.
Oh, they were always good around me, because I was a veteran to them. So now if I'd have been just starting out, they might say, get the hell out of here, kid. But they knew that they had respect for longevity, and they were always very, very nice to me. And they had some really, really good matches with the Fabulous Ones. And the Fabulous Ones were a takeoff on Jackie Fargo. They paint them up, put the top hat on them, and do this, and those guys went. And I've said this before, and I think Stan he took a little umbrage to it, but these guys were like third match or fourth match on the card as singles, and Jerry Jarrett put them together and did some videos on them, and they started when he brought them back as the Fabulous Ones. They sold out. They hadn't done anything. They had already been there, but he put them together as the Fabulous Ones, and they did record business, big time business. So, because what they were selling basically sex. They would do the like the calendar deals, like they'd lay down, lay a towel over their private parts.
You never sent me your calendar shot. that you did. You said you did that once, like a glamour shot for the ladies and some of the fellas.
I never said I did that.
You said you did one once where it was more risque than your regular. No, you weren't. You said you had
was.
One.
I've never done that.
Really?
Dundee did it.
Lawler did it. I know that.
Lawler did it.
It's like I thought he was lying on a bear skin rug. It just turns out it was him.
Yeah, Dundee did it. Lawler did it. I think the Fabs kind of did it.
Oh, jeez, you've got a portfolio of incredibly gay photos. They're amazing artifacts.
Yeah,
it was a different time. I know.
Here we go. So, hey, what was his name? The guy from England?
Who, me?
With Miss Linda?
Oh, Adrian.
Adrian did it. So, and Adrian, he did a song about me. He says, what is it? Something strange about a cowboy. You ever heard that song?
I think we may have listened to it on the show.
Oh, it's great.
It is clever. It is.
No, he was good. So
before we get off the thing, it could Hawk and Animal in '83 work, because I think they had a reputation of just being a couple of muscle guys and just destroying people basically. But in your experience, were they actually decent workers?
Not really. I mean, no, they could do their stuff, and then it was up to the heel to do the rest of it. They did their part of it. Is just be big, rugged looking ass kickers in the corner. And if you got one down, they was waiting for the tag. When you made the tag, the place would erupt and boom, boom, boom. Then you're on the way home. So I wouldn't suggest doing maybe a convoluted finish with them, because it might get lost. It might even confuse the fans, really, because the fans were just used to them with sheer power, brute strength, but they were over, big time over.
Were they bigger draws than Jerry Lawler during their brief thing? Because no. I think it is said that they drew the biggest houses on top, supposedly.
No, they didn't draw if you sell out Memphis, you sell out Memphis, regardless of what the ticket prices are. A sellout is a sellout. So, and yeah, they did some sellouts. But Lawler, he's probably got the record of sellouts in Memphis. So, I mean, they'd have to be there 20 years to beat his sellouts, because he was selling out back in the 70s. Him and Jackie Fargo.
On that basis, we're going to shut down the show. Ask Dutch Anything, episode 58. If you want to email future episodes of Ask Dutch Anything, then it is questionsfordutch@gmail.com. We did all the plugs as well at the beginning of the show, so if you're just desperate to hear them again, just start the episode again, I guess. Until then, we will see you again on Friday for Storytime with Dutch Mantell. We the people.
We the people.